My name is Marcus Thompson, and I've been buying and selling items on Craigslist for over 8 years. I run a small electronics repair business in Bakersfield, California, and I supplement my income by flipping vintage equipment I find online. I thought I'd seen every type of scammer, weirdo, and oddball the platform could produce. What happened on March 15, 2023, proved me dead wrong and introduced me to a world of delusion I never knew existed. It was a typical Tuesday evening. I was scrolling through the For Sale section after finishing repairs on 3 old radios, looking for vintage electronics when I spotted the strangest listing I'd ever encountered. Premium Mountain Air captured fresh $25 per box. The description read, Authentic Sierra Nevada mountain air, hand-collected at 8,000 feet elevation. Perfect for meditation, health benefits, and spiritual cleansing. Each box contains 2.5 cubic feet of pure mountain atmosphere. Serious inquiries only. Cash only. Will meet in public locations. References available upon request. Initially, I thought it was either an elaborate joke or some kind of performance art project. But something about the earnest, professional tone and the specific technical details made me pause. The seller's name was listed as purebreath_Sarah. And when I clicked on her profile, she had surprisingly good ratings, 4.8 stars from 47 previous transactions selling what appeared to be completely normal household items, kitchen appliances, books, furniture, garden tools. The cognitive dissonance was jarring. How does someone go from selling used blenders to bottled mountain air? My curiosity got the better of me, so I messaged her. Hi Sarah, I saw your listing for mountain air. Can you tell me more about how exactly this works? How is the air packaged and preserved? Her response came back within 10 minutes, and it was disturbingly detailed and scientific sounding. Hello Marcus! Thank you so much for your interest in my premium air collection service. Each box contains exactly 2.5 cubic feet of pure Sierra Nevada mountain air, harvested during optimal atmospheric conditions between 4 to 6 a.m. when oxygen content is at its daily peak and pollutant levels are minimal. I use specialized collection techniques I've developed over 3 years of research and field testing. The air is sealed in food-grade containers with proprietary one-way valve systems to maintain freshness and prevent contamination. Each batch is tested for purity using professional air quality monitoring equipment, and every purchase comes with a certificate of authenticity detailing collection location, elevation, date, time, and atmospheric conditions. I also provide detailed usage instructions for maximum therapeutic benefit. The response was so thorough, so professionally written, and so scientifically detailed that I found myself actually wondering whether this woman had discovered some legitimate niche market I'd never heard of. Against my better judgment, and driven by morbid curiosity, I agreed to meet her at the Westfield Shopping Center the following Saturday afternoon. When I arrived at the designated meeting spot near the food court, I immediately spotted her. Sarah appeared to be in her mid-40s, wearing a crisp white lab coat over dark jeans and professional-looking black shoes. She carried a large aluminum briefcase and had shoulder-length brown hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Wire-rimmed glasses gave her an academic appearance. What struck me most was how completely normal and professional she looked, like a nurse, medical technician, or research scientist you'd encounter at any hospital or laboratory. Marcus Thompson? She asked, approaching with a confident, practiced smile and extending her hand for a firm handshake. Thank you so much for meeting with me today. I really appreciate customers who take the time to learn about the product before making a purchase decision. I brought several samples and demonstration materials for you to examine. She led me to a nearby table, set down her briefcase with careful precision, and opened it like a salesperson presenting luxury goods. Inside were dozens of small cardboard boxes, each about the size of a jewelry gift box, arranged in neat rows with small foam dividers between them. Every box was labeled with detailed handwritten tags. Sierra Peak 7,800 feet March 12, 2023, 5:23 a.m. barometric pressure 30.15, and similar scientific-looking information. This elevation is my most popular product line. she said, selecting one of the boxes and holding it reverently. The air at 7,800 feet has optimal oxygen content with minimal urban pollutants. The early morning collection time ensures maximum purity before daily atmospheric contamination begins. I drive up there every Tuesday and Friday morning to collect fresh batches during peak conditions. I stared at the small cardboard box in her hands, trying to process what I was witnessing. Sarah, I have to ask directly, this is actually air? Like regular atmospheric air that you've put into boxes? Her expression shifted slightly, becoming mildly defensive but maintaining professional composure. Marcus, it's definitely not regular air. This is premium mountain air with documented therapeutic benefits. The elevation, atmospheric pressure, and collection methodology create a completely different product than what you'd experience at sea level or in urban environments. Many of my customers report significant improvements in sleep quality, enhanced meditation experiences, increased energy levels, and better respiratory function. I maintain detailed customer testimonials and outcome tracking. She reached into another compartment of her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder filled with printed emails, handwritten letters, and what appeared to be customer feedback forms. I skimmed through several of them. They were from real email addresses with full names and incredibly detailed accounts of how Sarah's premium mountain air had transformed their lives. One woman from Fresno claimed it completely cured her chronic insomnia. A man from Stockton wrote that it helped manage his asthma symptoms better than his prescribed inhaler. Another person had written 3 full paragraphs about achieving unprecedented spiritual clarity and inner peace after using the product. How exactly do your customers use the air? I asked, genuinely fascinated by the elaborate mythology she'd constructed. There are several proven methodologies depending on the customer's specific therapeutic goals, Sarah explained with obvious enthusiasm, pulling out a laminated instruction sheet. For meditation and spiritual applications, I recommend opening the box slowly in a quiet environment and breathing deeply while focusing on the mountain imagery and elevation data I provide with each purchase. For general health and wellness benefits, the optimal protocol is opening 1 box per day and inhaling deeply for 5-minute sessions. Some customers incorporate it into existing breathing exercises or yoga practices. I also offer subscription services for customers who want regular deliveries. She demonstrated by carefully opening one of the sample boxes about halfway and taking a slow, deep, theatrical breath with her eyes closed. Can you detect the difference in quality? The crisp mountain freshness, the pine undertones, the clean atmospheric profile? Curious despite myself, I leaned forward and inhaled carefully. It smelled like cardboard. Maybe a very faint scent of pine car air freshener. The natural scent enhancement helps activate the psychological and physiological benefits, she explained, apparently noticing my slightly puzzled expression. I had precisely measured amounts of organic pine extract and other natural mountain aromatics to recreate the complete, authentic mountain experience. The olfactory component is crucial for maximum therapeutic impact. That revelation hit me like a cold wave. I was dealing with someone who had created an elaborate business model around selling empty boxes scented with pine air freshener. But what disturbed me most was her absolute conviction. This wasn't a cynical scammer looking for quick money. This was someone operating in a completely alternate reality where selling scented air was a legitimate health and wellness enterprise. Sarah, can I ask how long you've been developing this business? I asked as carefully as possible. 3 years next month, she replied with obvious pride. I started after a transformative spiritual retreat in the Sierra Nevada mountains. I experienced such profound physical and emotional healing from breathing the pure mountain air that I knew I had a responsibility to share this resource with others who might benefit. Since then, I've sold over 800 boxes to satisfied customers throughout California, Nevada, and Arizona. I'm actually getting inquiries from as far away as Texas and Colorado. 800 boxes. At $25 each, that represented $20,000 worth of empty cardboard boxes with pine scent. The scope of the operation was staggering. I'm fascinated by your collection methodology, I said. Can you walk me through your actual process for capturing and preserving the air? Sarah's eyes absolutely lit up like I'd asked about her life's passion. I'm so glad you asked. I've spent considerable time and resources developing a proprietary collection system using modified commercial-grade vacuum storage equipment and portable atmospheric monitoring devices. Every collection expedition begins with checking weather conditions, barometric pressure, and air quality indices. I hike to predetermined elevation points during optimal atmospheric windows, usually between 4 o'clock and 6 a.m. when pressure is stable and contamination is minimal. I use specialized collection bags with one-way valves, then transport the samples back to my home laboratory for processing and quality control testing. She pulled out her smartphone and began showing me an extensive photo gallery, Sarah in professional hiking gear on various mountain peaks, holding what appeared to be large clear plastic bags. Sarah in her garage with an elaborate contraption that looked like vacuum cleaner parts, plastic tubing, and electronic devices attached to cardboard boxes. Sarah with printed charts, graphs, and spreadsheets tracking atmospheric quality metrics, collection efficiency rates, and optimal harvesting schedules. The level of elaborate preparation and documentation was absolutely staggering. She had created an entire pseudoscientific methodology, complete with equipment, procedures, and data analysis, all centered around collecting and selling atmospheric air. I'm actually expanding the business significantly. She continued excitedly. Next month I'm launching a premium product line featuring air collected from Mount Whitney, the highest peak in the continental United States. Those boxes will retail for $45 each due to the extreme difficulty and specialized equipment required for high-altitude collection. I'm also developing seasonal varieties, spring air during wildflower blooms, autumn air with enhanced mineral content from leaf decomposition, winter air with maximum purity due to reduced biological activity. I found myself nodding along automatically, caught between genuine fascination and creeping horror at the comprehensive depth of her delusion. This wasn't someone running a simple con game. This was someone who had systematically constructed an entire alternate reality where selling scented air was not only legitimate but scientifically sophisticated. Would you be interested in purchasing a starter pack today? She asked hopefully. I have a 3-box sampler set for $60. 1 box each from 3 different elevations so you can experience the full range of therapeutic benefits and find your optimal altitude preference. I declined as politely as possible, explaining that I needed to do additional research before making any purchase decisions. Sarah seemed genuinely disappointed but remained professional, handing me an actual printed business card for Pure Breath Air Collection Services, LLC, with a professionally designed logo featuring mountain peaks and her complete contact information including a business phone number and website. As I walked back to my silver 2018 Honda Accord in the parking lot, I couldn't shake the deeply unsettling feeling that I'd just encountered something fundamentally disturbing about human psychology. This wasn't criminal behavior exactly, and her customers seemed genuinely satisfied, but the entire interaction had revealed something troubling about the intersection of belief, delusion, and commerce in our society. That evening, I spent several hours researching Sarah's business online. She maintained a professionally designed website with detailed product descriptions, customer testimonials, scientific-sounding explanations of therapeutic benefits, and even a subscription service offering monthly premium air deliveries. Her social media accounts had hundreds of followers and regular posts documenting collection expeditions, customer feedback, and educational content about air quality and respiratory health. 3 days later, I received a follow-up email from Sarah with a personalized discount offer and links to recent news articles about air pollution in major metropolitan areas. Her message read, "Hi Marcus. I hope you're seriously considering the documented health benefits of accessing clean mountain air sources. With increasing pollution levels in urban areas and growing awareness of respiratory health issues, more people are discovering the value of supplementing their daily air intake with pure, natural alternatives. I'm offering a 15% discount on any purchase made within the next week. Please let me know if you'd like to try a sample box or if you have any additional questions about the collection and purification process. I never responded to her email, but found myself compulsively checking her Craigslist listings over the following weeks. She continued posting regularly with increasingly elaborate product descriptions, higher prices, and new product categories. The customer reviews kept appearing, all overwhelmingly positive, all describing transformative, life-changing experiences with purchased air. What continues to bother me most about the entire encounter is that I still cannot definitively determine whether Sarah represents a brilliant, if unethical, entrepreneur who has identified and exploited the perfect market, people desperately seeking simple solutions to complex health and wellness challenges, or someone who has become so psychologically invested in her own delusion that she genuinely believes she's providing legitimate therapeutic services. The possibility that it might be the latter is infinitely more disturbing than simple fraud. Either way, my encounter with Sarah forced me to confront some uncomfortable questions about the nature of belief, commerce, and mental health in our society. How many other people are operating successful businesses based on elaborate delusions? How thin is the line between entrepreneurship and psychological dysfunction? And most unsettling of all, if her customers are genuinely satisfied with their purchases, who am I to judge the validity of their experience? Have you ever encountered someone selling something so bizarre that you couldn't determine whether they were deliberately scamming people or genuinely believed in their product? What's the strangest item you've seen for sale online that actually had positive customer reviews and repeat buyers? What I didn't realize was that my encounter with Sarah was just the tip of the iceberg. 2 weeks later, I'd discover something that made selling mountain air seem almost reasonable by comparison. My name is Jennifer Martinez, and I've lived in the same duplex on Willow Court in Riverside, California for 4 years. I'm a single mother working as a dental hygienist, and I thought I had a pretty good handle on my quiet neighborhood. What happened on July 8, 2023, made me realize how dangerously naive I'd been about the person living just 15 feet away from my front door. My neighbor Kevin Henderson seemed like the ideal neighbor when he moved in 2 years ago. He appeared to be in his early 30s, worked from home doing something with computer programming, and kept his half of the duplex property meticulously maintained. His lawn was always perfectly trimmed, his 2020 Toyota Camry in dark blue was spotless, and he never played loud music or threw parties. He was polite when we occasionally crossed paths collecting mail or taking out trash, offering a friendly nod and sometimes commenting on the weather. Honestly, I considered myself lucky to have such a considerate, low-maintenance neighbor. My daily routine was pretty predictable due to work and my 8-year-old daughter Emma's school schedule. I leave for the dental office at 7:30 a.m. sharp, work until 4:30 p.m., pick up Emma from after-school care at 5:15 p.m., and we're usually home by 5:45 p.m. Kevin seemed to have an uncanny ability to be outside at exactly the right times, watering his plants when I left for work, checking his mailbox when I returned home, taking out trash at the same time I did. I attributed it to coincidence and similar schedules rather than anything deliberate. That Tuesday evening in July, I was browsing Craigslist's missed connections section out of boredom after putting Emma to bed. I occasionally read them for entertainment, the desperate romantic posts, awkward encounter descriptions, and sometimes genuinely sweet stories about people trying to reconnect. It was my guilty pleasure, like reading tabloid magazines. That's when I saw a post that made my blood run completely cold. Beautiful brunette dental hygienist on Willow Court M4W, Riverside. The post read, I see you every single day coming home from work around 5:45 p.m. with your adorable daughter. You drive a red 2017 Honda CR-V and have the most amazing, genuine smile I've ever seen. You live in the duplex with the bright yellow front door and always wear different colored scrubs, blue on Mondays, pink on Tuesdays, green on Wednesdays, purple on Thursdays, and white on Fridays. I think we'd be absolutely perfect together, but I'm way too shy and nervous to approach you directly in person. You seem like such a caring, nurturing person, especially watching how gently and patiently you help your daughter out of the car every evening and walk her to the door. I'd love to take you to dinner at Olive Garden. I know you enjoy Italian food because I've seen the Romano's macaroni grill delivery boxes in your trash on Tuesday nights. If this is you reading this, please respond. I promise I'm a genuinely good guy who just wants the chance to get to know you better and maybe build something meaningful together. I live very close by and I've been hoping for months to find the courage to introduce myself properly. Every single detail was absolutely, horrifyingly accurate. My car's exact make, model, year, and color. My precise work schedule. My scrub color rotation that I'd established to make getting dressed easier. Even my weekly Italian food delivery habit that I'd never mentioned to anyone in the neighborhood. My hands were literally shaking as I checked the posting timestamp. It had been posted just 2 hours earlier, at 8:47 p.m. Someone had been systematically watching me, documenting my daily patterns and personal habits with disturbing precision and attention to detail. I immediately called my sister Rebecca, who lives about 20 minutes away in Moreno Valley. "Jen, this is seriously creepy and concerning," she said after I read the entire post aloud. "You need to call the police right now. Tonight." "But what actual crime has been committed? He hasn't threatened me or trespassed on my property. He just posted about me online. Is that even illegal?" The level of detailed surveillance described in that post goes way beyond casual neighborly observation. This person has been systematically stalking and documenting your routine for months. That's predatory behavior. I spent that entire night barely sleeping, checking door and window locks repeatedly, peering through curtains at every small sound from outside. Every creak of the duplex settling, every car door closing in the neighborhood, every footstep on the sidewalk made my heart race. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in over a year. I couldn't bear the thought of following my predictable routine knowing that someone had been watching and documenting my every move with such obsessive detail. Around 10:15 a.m., I heard Kevin's front door open and close, followed by his car engine starting. I waited exactly 5 minutes, then crept to my living room window and carefully peered through the blinds. His driveway was empty, and his car was gone. This was my opportunity to do some investigating. I'd never really paid close attention to Kevin's yard and living space before, but now I examined everything with new, suspicious eyes. His front windows provided a completely unobstructed view of my driveway, front door, and the entire sidewalk where Emma and I walked to and from the car every day. He'd positioned a small outdoor table and folding chair on his front porch directly facing my half of the duplex. Perfect positioning for casual surveillance disguised as simply enjoying fresh air and reading. But what really made my stomach drop was glimpsing something through his living room window. There was a small spiral notebook sitting open on a table positioned right next to the window, and I could clearly see handwritten entries, what appeared to be times and dates, and some kind of schedule or tracking chart. That afternoon, I drove directly to the Riverside Police Department and spoke with Officer Patricia Woods, a middle-aged woman who seemed experienced with these types of situations. Unfortunately, posting a missed connection advertisement, even with very specific personal details, doesn't automatically constitute criminal stalking under California law, she explained sympathetically. However, if you feel genuinely threatened or if his behavior escalates to direct contact or more invasive actions, we can document everything and pursue harassment or stalking charges. She advised me to take screenshots of the post, document any future incidents with dates and times, avoid any direct interaction with Kevin, and call the police immediately if he attempted face-to-face contact or if his behavior became more aggressive or threatening. When I returned home, I decided to test my growing suspicions about Kevin's monitoring behavior. Instead of parking in my usual spot directly in front of my door, I deliberately parked on the street about 50 feet away. Within less than 3 minutes, Kevin's front door opened and he emerged, ostensibly to water plants that honestly looked perfectly healthy and well-maintained. He kept glancing toward my unusually positioned car with obvious confusion and what appeared to be mild anxiety. That evening, I deliberately broke my established routine completely. Instead of coming home at my usual 5:45 p.m., I picked up Emma early from after-school care and drove to my mother's house in Corona for dinner, not returning to the duplex until after 9:30 p.m., well past Emma's normal bedtime. The next morning, I checked Craigslist and found a new post that confirmed my worst fears. Missed connection with dental hygienist. Where did you go yesterday? I waited for you yesterday evening, but you didn't come home at your usual time. I hope everything is okay with you and your beautiful daughter. I was really looking forward to seeing you in your Wednesday green scrubs like always. I got worried when your car wasn't in the driveway at the normal time. Please respond if you saw my previous message. I just want to meet you properly and get to know the amazing person I see every day. The possessive, entitled tone and his obvious distress about my schedule deviation confirmed that Kevin wasn't just casually interested. He was obsessively monitoring my life and becoming genuinely upset when I didn't follow expected patterns. He was treating my daily routine like a television show he was entitled to watch. Over the following week, I started varying my routine dramatically and unpredictably. Different departure times for work, taking alternate routes home, parking in different locations, even staying overnight at my mother's house twice. Each significant change generated new Craigslist posts with increasingly desperate, concerning, and possessive language. Beautiful neighbor, why are you suddenly avoiding your normal schedule? I know you've seen my posts by now. We're meant to be together. I can feel the connection between us. I've been nothing but respectful and patient, watching you from a distance for months without bothering you. The least you could do is acknowledge my feelings and give me a chance. Your routine changes are making me worried about you. Is someone forcing you to alter your schedule? Are you in some kind of trouble? The posts revealed Kevin's growing frustration, sense of entitlement, and increasingly delusional thinking. He genuinely believed that his months of covert surveillance demonstrated romantic devotion and respectful courtship rather than predatory stalking behavior. In his mind, I owed him acknowledgement and consideration because of his patience. 2 weeks after discovering the first post, I was carrying grocery bags from my car to my front door when Kevin finally decided to approach me directly. Jennifer, he called out, walking purposefully across his perfectly manicured lawn toward my driveway. I froze completely, grocery bags in both hands, house keys clutched between my fingers like makeshift weapons. I know you've seen my Craigslist posts, he said, stopping about 8 feet away from me. I don't understand why you won't respond to them. I've been nothing but patient and respectful for months. Kevin, what you're doing isn't respectful or normal. It's stalking. You've been watching me, documenting my schedule, following my activities without my knowledge or consent. His expression shifted to confused hurt, like I'd accused him of something completely unreasonable. I wasn't stalking you, Jennifer. I was just trying to get to know you better before approaching you directly. I wanted to make sure we were truly compatible before risking rejection. Compatible? You've been spying on me and my daughter for months. You know my work schedule, my clothing rotation, my food preferences, my trash pickup habits. That's not getting to know someone, that's surveillance. I prefer to think of it as being thorough and considerate. He replied with disturbing sincerity. Most guys would have just walked up and started bothering you immediately. I took time to learn about you first, to understand your needs and preferences, so I could offer you exactly what would make you happy. The complete disconnect between his perception and reality was absolutely chilling. In Kevin's mind, months of covert surveillance was simply being a thoughtful, considerate potential romantic partner. He'd constructed an elaborate fantasy where his stalking behavior was actually courteous and romantic. Kevin, I need you to stop posting about me online immediately and stop monitoring my activities. If this behavior continues, I'll have to involve law enforcement. His face darkened slightly, and for the first time, I saw a flash of anger. You're completely overreacting, Jennifer. I've never done anything inappropriate or threatening. I've never even tried to talk to you before today. I was being respectful by keeping my distance until I felt ready to introduce myself properly. Ready? You've been documenting my clothing, my food preferences, my work schedule, my daughter's routine for months. That's not respect, that's obsession and stalking. I call it being prepared and considerate," he replied, his voice taking on a slightly defensive edge. "Most women complain that men don't pay attention to details or really listen to what they want. I was making sure I could be the perfect partner for you. That night, I installed 2 security cameras covering my front door and driveway, changed all my locks, and printed out screenshots of every single one of Kevin's Craigslist posts. The next morning, I took everything back to Officer Woods. This pattern of escalating behavior, combined with the direct confrontation yesterday, definitely changes the situation," she said, carefully reviewing all the evidence I'd collected. "We can file a restraining order application based on stalking and harassment. The documentation you've gathered should be sufficient." The temporary restraining order was approved and issued 3 days later. When Kevin was served with the legal papers by a sheriff's deputy, I watched through my window as he read the documents with an expression of complete shock and bewilderment, as if he genuinely couldn't understand how his romantic gestures had been so thoroughly misinterpreted by both me and the legal system. But here's what continues to disturb me most about the entire experience. Kevin never acknowledged that his behavior was inappropriate or illegal. Even after legal intervention and a restraining order, he maintained that his actions were not only appropriate but actually considerate and romantic. He'd created such an elaborate fantasy about our non-existent relationship that he couldn't recognize the reality of his stalking behavior. The restraining order prohibited Kevin from contacting me directly or indirectly, including through social media or online posts. For about 2 months, things were quiet and I started to feel safe again. Then, 6 months after the restraining order was issued, Kevin moved out suddenly. His replacement tenant, a woman named Angela, mentioned during casual conversation that she'd found several boxes of materials left behind in the garage, printed photographs of me and Emma taken from his windows, detailed handwritten notes documenting our daily activities, and what appeared to be fantasy scenarios written about imaginary conversations and dates we'd supposedly had. The experience taught me that sometimes the most dangerous people aren't the obviously threatening ones making overt threats. Sometimes they're the quiet, polite neighbors who seem perfectly normal while constructing elaborate delusional fantasies about relationships that exist only in their minds. Kevin's behavior was methodical, obsessive, and completely divorced from reality. But he presented himself as simply being a considerate romantic interested in getting to know me properly. Have you ever discovered that someone you considered a normal acquaintance or neighbor was secretly obsessed with your life and daily routine? How well do you really know the people who live around you and have the opportunity to observe your patterns and activities? What would you do if you found detailed documentation of your private life in someone else's possession? I thought restraining orders and Kevin moving away had solved my stalking problem completely. 3 weeks later, I'd learned how tragically wrong I was when I received an anonymous message that connected Kevin's behavior to something much larger and more organized than I'd ever imagined. My name is David Chen, and I've been buying and selling vintage electronics for 12 years, running a small restoration business out of my garage in Ashford, Pennsylvania. What I discovered inside a 1985 Zenith television on October 12, 2023, made me realize I'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than faulty capacitors and blown fuses. I found the TV listed on Craigslist by a seller named Maria Gonzalez in nearby Woodland. The ad was straightforward. Vintage Zenith TV $40 needs repair, won't turn on. The photos showed a classic wood-grain console model from the mid-80s, exactly the kind of set I specialize in restoring. These old Zeniths are built like tanks, and usually just need basic component replacement to work perfectly for decades more. Maria lived in a small ranch house on Cedar Falls Road, and when I arrived in my white 2016 Ford F-150, she was waiting on the front porch looking nervous. She appeared to be in her late 50s, with graying hair and work-worn hands. What struck me immediately was how eager she seemed to get rid of the television. "It belonged to my brother Roberto," she explained hurriedly as we loaded the heavy console into my truck bed. "He passed away 3 months ago, and I'm cleaning out his apartment. The thing hasn't worked in years, but maybe you can fix it up for someone else." She helped me lift it, but I noticed her hands were shaking slightly. When I tried to make small talk about Roberto or ask about the TV's history, she became evasive and kept glancing around nervously, as if expecting someone to appear. "Just take it, please," she said, accepting my $40 quickly. Roberto would have wanted someone to make it work again. Back in my garage workshop, I began the standard diagnostic process. The first step is always removing the back panel to inspect the internal components for obvious damage, corrosion, or blown parts. These old console TVs have plenty of room inside for circuit boards, transformers, and the massive cathode ray tube. What I found wasn't electrical components. Taped to the inside of the back panel, wrapped in multiple layers of plastic sheeting, was a manila envelope about 8 inches by 10 inches. It was sealed with duct tape and felt like it contained photographs or documents. My first thought was that Roberto had hidden some personal papers for safekeeping, maybe important documents, family photos, or financial records. But as I carefully removed the package and examined it more closely, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The envelope had writing on it in what appeared to be Spanish, and there were several official-looking stamps and markings that looked like border control or customs documentation. Against my better judgment, I opened the envelope. Inside were approximately 30 color photographs, each about 4 inches by 6 inches. They weren't family pictures or personal memories. They showed various locations that appeared to be border crossing points, chain-link fences, guard towers, remote desert areas, and what looked like warehouse or industrial facilities. Many of the photos had handwritten notes in Spanish indicating dates, times, and what appeared to be security shift schedules. There were also several hand-drawn maps on notebook paper showing detailed layouts of buildings, guard positions, camera locations, and what looked like patrol routes. The level of detail was extraordinary. Someone had spent considerable time conducting surveillance and documenting security procedures. But what really made my hands start shaking was a separate sheet of paper with a list of names, phone numbers, and dollar amounts ranging from $2,000 to $15,000 per person. Next to each name was a date and a location, mostly cities along the Texas-Mexico border: El Paso, Laredo, McAllen, Brownsville. I was holding what appeared to be documentation for a human smuggling operation. My first instinct was to call the police immediately, but something made me pause. If Roberto had been involved in smuggling people across the border, and if Maria knew about these documents, why would she sell me the TV with the evidence still hidden inside? Either she didn't know about the package, or she was trying to get rid of evidence without directly destroying it herself. I spent the next hour carefully photographing every document and map with my phone before sealing everything back in the original envelope. Whatever Roberto's involvement had been, these documents represented real people who had paid substantial amounts of money to cross the border, and there might be ongoing legal cases or investigations where this evidence could be crucial. That evening, I called the FBI field office in Philadelphia and spoke with Agent Sarah Mitchell. After explaining what I'd found, she arranged to meet me the following morning at my workshop. Agent Mitchell arrived with a partner, Agent James Rodriguez, in an unmarked gray 2019 Ford Taurus. They examined the documents carefully while I explained how I'd acquired the television and my interaction with Maria Gonzalez. These appear to be operational documents for a coyote network that we've been investigating for over 2 years, Agent Rodriguez explained. The names on this list match several ongoing missing persons cases and suspected human trafficking incidents along the Texas border. Roberto Gonzalez was a person of interest in our investigation, Agent Mitchell added. He died in a car accident 3 months ago, which effectively ended our surveillance of his activities. We suspected he was a mid-level coordinator for a larger smuggling network, but we never found direct evidence of his involvement. What about his sister Maria? Was she involved? We don't believe so, Agent Rodriguez said. Our intelligence suggests Roberto kept his criminal activities completely separate from his family. Maria probably had no idea these documents were hidden in the television. But why would Roberto hide evidence in an old TV? I asked. It's actually a common tactic, Agent Mitchell explained. Old electronics that don't work are rarely examined closely, even during searches. If law enforcement had raided Roberto's apartment, they probably would have ignored broken televisions and focused on computers, phones, and obvious hiding places. The agents spent several hours documenting everything and taking detailed photographs. They explained that the evidence I'd discovered could help identify victims of human trafficking, locate missing persons, and potentially break up the larger criminal network that Roberto had been working with. The maps and security information are particularly valuable, Agent Rodriguez noted. This level of detailed surveillance suggests Roberto was involved in planning routes and timing for border crossings. Some of these documents could help us identify other members of the smuggling network. 3 weeks later, Agent Mitchell called to update me on their investigation. The evidence from Roberto's hidden package had led to the arrest of 6 people involved in the smuggling operation and helped locate 4 missing persons who had been listed as victims of suspected human trafficking. The financial records you found helped us trace money transfers and identify bank accounts used by the criminal network, she explained. We also discovered that Roberto was planning to leave the smuggling business, which might explain why he hid the documents instead of destroying them. He may have been keeping them as insurance or evidence against his criminal partners. What happened to Maria? Is she in any trouble? We interviewed her extensively, and we're confident she had no knowledge of her brother's criminal activities or the hidden documents. She's been very cooperative with our investigation. But the story didn't end there. 2 months later, I received a phone call that made me realize how dangerous my accidental discovery had been. You found something that didn't belong to you, a man's voice said in accented English. Roberto promised those documents would be destroyed. His sister was supposed to handle that. I don't know what you're talking about, I replied, though my heart was racing. I bought a television for parts and repair. We know exactly what you found and what you did with it. Roberto's information has caused problems for our business. Problems that need to be fixed. The line went dead. I immediately called Agent Mitchell, who arranged for local police to increase patrols around my house and workshop. She explained that the arrests their investigation had generated had likely disrupted a significant smuggling network, and that remaining members might be looking for revenge against anyone they perceived as responsible. Roberto's hidden documents were more valuable than we initially realized, she said. The network was using his surveillance information to coordinate crossings for multiple cells operating along a 200-mile stretch of the border. When we arrested 6 key members, it essentially shut down their entire operation in that region. For 3 months, I had to be extremely careful about my daily routine, vary my work schedule, and install additional security cameras around my property. The local police conducted regular drive-bys, and I was given a direct phone number to call if I noticed any suspicious activity. The experience taught me that sometimes the most ordinary transactions can connect you to extraordinary criminal networks. Roberto had chosen to hide crucial evidence in a broken television specifically because it seemed worthless and uninteresting. If he hadn't died in that car accident, if Maria had thrown the TV away instead of selling it, if I hadn't been thorough in my repair process, those documents would never have been discovered. 6 months later, Agent Mitchell called with final updates. The FBI's investigation had expanded to include operations in 4 states, and had resulted in a total of 18 arrests. Several victims of human trafficking had been located and provided with assistance, and the criminal network had been effectively dismantled. Your accidental discovery provided the breakthrough we needed to solve cases that had been cold for over 2 years, she said. Sometimes the most important evidence is hidden in the most unlikely places. The old Zenith television, once I'd removed Roberto's hidden package, worked perfectly after replacing just 2 capacitors and a fuse. I donated it to a local senior center, but I never told them about its history or what I'd found inside. Have you ever discovered something unexpected or concerning hidden inside something you purchased secondhand? Do you think people have a responsibility to report suspicious findings, even when it might put them in danger? How many other ordinary objects might be hiding evidence of serious crimes? I thought my involvement with Roberto's smuggling documents was over after the arrests were made. Then I received a message that connected his operation to something that had been happening in my own neighborhood for months. My name is Angela Thompson, and I've been collecting vintage clothing for 8 years, specializing in authentic leather jackets from the 1970s and 80s. I run a small consignment boutique called Timeless Threads in Greenwood, North Carolina, and I supplement my inventory by scouring estate sales, thrift stores, and online marketplaces for quality pieces. What I discovered about a seemingly innocent Craigslist ad on November 18, 2023, revealed how 3 years of disturbing neighborhood mysteries were all connected to a single, decades-old crime that had shaped an entire community's experience with fear and manipulation. The listing appeared completely straightforward when I first spotted it. Vintage brown leather jacket, men's large, $75, genuine leather, great condition, classic 1980s style, perfect for collector or everyday wear. It was posted by someone using the handle retroclothes_Mike in the Greenwood area. The photographs showed a gorgeous chocolate brown leather jacket with distinctive brass zippers, classic lapel styling, and what appeared to be a unique quilted silk lining pattern that I'd never encountered before in my years of collecting. What initially caught my attention wasn't just the jacket's obvious quality and reasonable pricing, but a small detail I noticed in one of the background photos. The seller had laid the jacket on what appeared to be a wooden workbench for photographing, and partially visible in the background was an old newspaper with a headline I could barely make out that seemed to read, "Local man missing after." The date visible on the newspaper appeared to be from 2013, which struck me as odd for someone selling vintage clothing in 2023. I messaged Mike about the jacket that same evening, and his response came back within 30 minutes. "Hi Angela. Thanks for your interest in the leather jacket. This piece belonged to my Uncle Thomas, who passed away last year after a long illness. I'm currently cleaning out his workshop and found several vintage clothing items and accessories that he'd collected over the years. The jacket has been stored carefully in a climate-controlled environment and is in excellent condition with minimal wear. I can meet anywhere in the Greenwood area at your convenience. Looking to sell quickly as I'm moving out of state next month." We arranged to meet at Corner Coffee on Maple Avenue the following Saturday afternoon. Mike appeared to be in his early 40s, with thinning brown hair and nervous mannerisms. He was driving a silver 2015 Chevrolet Silverado that looked well-maintained but had several air fresheners hanging from the rearview mirror. Throughout our brief interaction, he seemed genuinely eager to complete the sale quickly, constantly checking his watch and repeatedly glancing around the coffee shop parking lot as if expecting someone to appear. Uncle Thomas was really passionate about vintage clothing and leather goods, he explained as I carefully examined the jacket under the afternoon sunlight. He had this whole workshop set up where he restored old leather items as a hobby: jackets, boots, belts, anything leather really. Found this particular piece in a storage box along with some of his restoration tools and supplies. The jacket was absolutely stunning, genuine leather that had aged to perfection with a rich patina, brass hardware that showed exactly the right amount of wear and oxidation, and construction quality that you simply don't find in modern garments. The leather was supple but substantial, and every stitch appeared to be original and intact. It was exactly the type of piece that serious vintage collectors search for years to find. But as I examined it more closely, turning it inside out to check the lining and construction details, I noticed something that made me pause and examine it more carefully. Sewn discreetly into the inner lining, near the left interior pocket, was a small leather tag with hand-tooled initials. RM 2013. "Do you happen to know what these initials represent?" I asked Mike, pointing out the small tag. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly, and he seemed to think for a moment before responding. "Oh, that little tag. Uncle Thomas sometimes put his own craftsman markings on items he restored or worked on. Those initials probably stand for restored and modified along with the year he completed the work. He was pretty meticulous about documenting his projects." Something about his explanation felt rehearsed and not entirely convincing, but the jacket was exactly what I'd been searching for to complete a particular era display in my boutique. so I paid him the $75 in cash and carefully placed the jacket in my car. That evening back at home, I was conducting my usual detailed examination of the new acquisition, checking all pockets, examining seams for repairs, and documenting any unique characteristics for my inventory records. That's when I made a discovery that would change everything. Hidden in a small interior chest pocket that I'd initially overlooked was a carefully folded piece of paper. When I unfolded it, I found a detailed service receipt from Hillcrest Auto Repair dated October 15, 2013, for brake system work performed on a 2011 Ford Escape. The customer name printed clearly at the top of the receipt was Richard Morrison, and the total cost had been $347.82 for brake pad replacement and rotor resurfacing. Driven by curiosity and a growing sense of unease, I immediately went to my computer and conducted an online search for Richard Morrison missing 2013 North Carolina. What I discovered made my blood run completely cold and my hands start shaking. Richard Morrison, age 34, had disappeared without a trace on October 23, 2013, just 8 days after the brake work documented on the receipt I'd found. He'd left his job at Piedmont Manufacturing at the end of his evening shift and never arrived home to his wife and 2 young children. His 2011 Ford Escape had been discovered abandoned 3 days later in a remote parking area near Woodland State Park, approximately 15 miles from his workplace. Despite extensive search efforts involving local police, state investigators, and volunteer search teams, Richard's body was never recovered, and the case remained officially unsolved after 10 years of investigation. According to the detailed news articles I found, the brown leather jacket Richard had been wearing when he disappeared was specifically described in police reports as vintage-style brown leather with distinctive brass zippers and quilted silk lining. The description matched the jacket I just purchased perfectly in every detail. I was holding Richard Morrison's jacket, the same jacket he'd been wearing on the night he vanished without a trace 10 years ago. I spent the remainder of that night researching everything I could find about Richard's disappearance, reading through years of news coverage, police statements, and family appeals for information. Richard had been a machine operator at the manufacturing plant, married to his high school sweetheart Jennifer, and father to 2 children ages 6 and 4 at the time of his disappearance. By all accounts, he was a devoted family man with no history of mental health issues, substance abuse, or financial problems that might explain a voluntary disappearance. The police investigation had initially focused on the possibility of an accidental death or suicide, particularly given that his car had been found near a popular hiking area with several cliff faces and deep ravines. However, Richard's family had consistently maintained that he would never have voluntarily abandoned his children under any circumstances, and no evidence of self-harm had ever been discovered despite thorough searches of the area. The case had generated significant media attention locally, with regular news coverage for the first 2 years after Richard's disappearance. His wife Jennifer had made numerous public appeals for information, offering rewards for any leads that might help locate her husband or determine what had happened to him. The case had eventually gone cold when all investigative leads were exhausted and no new evidence emerged. Early the next morning, I called the Greenwood Police Department and asked to speak with someone about the Richard Morrison missing person case. I was connected with Detective Lisa Patterson, who identified herself as the current case investigator who had inherited the file from a retired colleague. "We never officially closed the Richard Morrison investigation," she explained after I provided a detailed account of what I'd discovered. "His disappearance has remained one of our most frustrating unsolved cases for the past decade. The fact that you've recovered what appears to be his personal effects suggests someone either knows what happened to Richard or was directly involved in his disappearance." I provided Detective Patterson with all the details about Mike, the Craigslist advertisement, our meeting location, and the circumstances surrounding the jacket sale. She asked me to bring the jacket and receipt to the police station immediately for evidence processing and forensic examination. The fact that someone was attempting to sell Richard's personal belongings 10 years after his disappearance is extremely significant, she explained during our phone conversation. This could potentially be the breakthrough we've been hoping for in this case. 2 hours later, I was sitting in an interview room at the Greenwood Police Department, while Detective Patterson and her partner, Detective James Rodriguez, carefully examined the leather jacket and automotive service receipt. They photographed everything from multiple angles, documented the discovery location within the jacket, and sealed both items in evidence bags using proper chain of custody procedures. Mike's story about inheriting this jacket from his deceased uncle doesn't align with what we know about this case, Detective Rodriguez observed. If Thomas Torres had legitimately acquired this jacket through estate sales, donations, or other legal means, there would be documentation or some record of the transaction. The fact that Mike seemed nervous during your meeting and appeared eager to complete the sale quickly suggests he was fully aware of what he was selling and wanted to distance himself from it as rapidly as possible. The detectives initiated an immediate background investigation into Michael Torres and his family members. What they discovered provided crucial context that transformed Mike from a potential witness into a primary suspect in Richard Morrison's decade-old disappearance. Mike Torres worked at Piedmont Manufacturing from 2011 until 2014, Detective Patterson explained during a follow-up call later that week. He was employed there at the same time as Richard Morrison and had been questioned as a potential witness in our original investigation because several coworkers reported seeing them involved in a heated argument about overtime scheduling and work assignments just 2 days before Richard disappeared. The original investigation files showed that Mike had been interviewed twice in the weeks following Richard's disappearance. He'd claimed that their workplace disagreement had been resolved amicably, and that he had no knowledge of Richard's plans or activities outside of work. At the time, investigators had no evidence linking Mike to Richard's disappearance beyond their minor workplace conflict, so he hadn't been considered a serious suspect. What's significant now is that Mike left his job at Piedmont Manufacturing just 6 months after Richard's disappearance, Detective Rodriguez noted. He gave his employer 2 weeks' notice and relocated to a different county, claiming he needed a fresh start for personal reasons. Armed with this new information and the evidence I'd provided, the detectives obtained a search warrant for Mike's current residence, a mobile home in Clearwater Valley, about 25 miles outside Greenwood. What they discovered during that search provided the final pieces needed to solve Richard Morrison's murder. In a storage shed behind Mike's trailer, investigators found a disturbing collection of items that had belonged to Richard Morrison: his wallet containing identification cards and credit cards, a silver watch engraved with RM 15th anniversary from his wife, a set of car keys that matched his abandoned Ford Escape, and several personal photographs that appeared to have been taken from Richard's wallet. But the most significant discovery was a handwritten letter that Mike had apparently composed years earlier but never sent or delivered. The letter, written on lined notebook paper and stored in a manila envelope marked "Insurance," contained a detailed confession describing how he had killed Richard Morrison during what began as a workplace dispute but escalated into a fatal confrontation. According to Mike's written confession, the argument that had started at Piedmont Manufacturing had continued to escalate over several days. On the evening of October 23, 2013, Mike had followed Richard after their shift ended, intending to resolve their conflict through physical intimidation. They had driven to a remote location where Mike claimed they had agreed to settle things like men. During the confrontation, Mike wrote that he had struck Richard with a tire iron he'd brought from his vehicle, intending to threaten him but not cause serious injury. However, the blow had caused Richard to fall and strike his head against a large rock, resulting in what Mike described as more damage than I ever intended to cause. Panicked and realizing that Richard was either dead or severely injured, Mike had made the decision to conceal his crime rather than seek medical assistance or contact authorities. He had loaded Richard's unconscious body into Richard's own vehicle, driven to an even more remote location, and buried him in a makeshift grave in heavily wooded terrain approximately 40 miles from the confrontation site. Mike had then returned to retrieve his own vehicle and had driven Richard's Ford Escape to Woodland State Park, where he abandoned it in the parking area before walking several miles to where he'd left his own car. His intention had been to make Richard's disappearance appear to be either a suicide or accidental death related to hiking in the park area. Mike kept Richard's personal belongings as what appears to be some form of psychological trophy collection, Detective Patterson explained. This behavior is consistent with certain types of killers who maintain physical reminders of their crimes as a way of reliving the experience, or maintaining a sense of power and control over their victims. During his arrest and subsequent interrogation, Mike initially denied any involvement in Richard's disappearance. However, when confronted with the physical evidence recovered from his property and his own written confession, he eventually admitted to killing Richard Morrison and agreed to lead investigators to the burial site. The location Mike described was in a densely forested area of private land that had never been searched during the original investigation because it was so far from where Richard's car had been found. After 10 years, Richard's remains were finally recovered, allowing his family to have the closure they had desperately sought for a decade. But here's where this story connects to all the disturbing incidents I mentioned at the beginning, and this is the part that still gives me nightmares. Michael Torres had been the puppet master behind virtually every bizarre and frightening Craigslist encounter that had occurred in our community over the past 3 years. During the extensive investigation that followed his arrest, police discovered that Mike had been operating multiple fake online identities and had been systematically orchestrating elaborate psychological manipulation campaigns targeting random community members through various online platforms. Mike had developed an extensive network of false personas and had been using Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, dating apps, and other online services to identify and manipulate vulnerable individuals throughout the region, Detective Rodriguez explained. He seemed to derive psychological satisfaction from creating chaos and exercising control over other people's lives. The mountain air seller Sarah from Story 1 had been completely real, but Mike Torres had been her very first customer. Using a fake identity, he had purchased multiple boxes of her premium mountain air, provided glowing reviews under various false names, and had actively encouraged her delusion by referring other fake customers to her business. He had essentially created the market demand that convinced Sarah her bizarre business model was legitimate and profitable. Kevin Henderson's stalking behavior from Story 2 had also been real, but investigators discovered that Mike had been anonymously contacting Kevin for months, providing detailed information about Jennifer Martinez's daily routine that he had gathered through his own surveillance activities. Mike had been feeding Kevin's obsession by sending anonymous messages encouraging his behavior, and providing specific suggestions for Craigslist posts designed to maximize Jennifer's fear and discomfort. Even Roberto Gonzalez's human smuggling operation from Story 3 had connections to Mike Torres. While Roberto's criminal activities had been independent, Mike had been aware of them and had occasionally provided Roberto with information about Border Patrol schedules and security procedures that he obtained through online law enforcement forums and social media monitoring. What we discovered is that Mike Torres had been functioning as a sort of criminal information broker and psychological manipulator, Detective Patterson explained. He identified people with existing vulnerabilities or criminal inclinations and then amplified or exploited those tendencies for his own psychological gratification. Mike's confession revealed that his decade-long campaign of manipulation and control had been driven by guilt over Richard Morrison's murder and a compulsive need to maintain power over his environment. Creating chaos in other people's lives had become his primary coping mechanism for dealing with the knowledge that he had committed murder and successfully evaded justice for 10 years. The investigation ultimately connected Mike Torres to 17 different Craigslist incidents over a 3-year period, including fake missed connections posts designed to create paranoia and suspicion between neighbors, fraudulent sales advertisements intended to waste people's time and money, anonymous messages sent to vulnerable individuals encouraging dangerous or self-destructive behavior, and elaborate catfishing schemes designed to manipulate people into compromising or embarrassing situations. What makes Mike's behavior particularly disturbing is how systematic and patient he was in identifying and exploiting human weaknesses, Detective Patterson noted. He would spend weeks or even months observing potential targets, learning their routines and psychological vulnerabilities, and then carefully crafting scenarios designed to cause maximum disruption and emotional distress. The scope of Mike's manipulation network was staggering. Police found detailed files on over 40 different individuals he had been monitoring or manipulating through various online platforms. He had maintained spreadsheets tracking their schedules, preferences, fears, and behavioral patterns. He had created elaborate fake personas complete with social media profiles, backstories, and relationship histories designed to appeal to specific psychological needs of his targets. 8 months after my discovery of Richard Morrison's leather jacket, Michael Torres was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder, plus additional consecutive sentences totaling 47 years for fraud, stalking, harassment, identity theft, and conspiracy charges related to his extensive online manipulation schemes. Richard Morrison's family was finally able to have the closure they had desperately sought for 10 years. At the sentencing hearing, Richard's widow Jennifer spoke about how Mike's crime had destroyed not just Richard's life, but had stolen 10 years of peace and certainty from their entire family. "What Mike Torres took from us wasn't just my husband's life," she said. "He stole our ability to grieve properly, to move forward, to feel safe in our own community. For 10 years, we lived with questions that consumed us every day. Now we know the truth, and while it doesn't bring Richard back, it allows us to finally find some measure of peace. The experience taught me that sometimes the most innocent-seeming transactions can be connected to serious crimes and that patient predators can spend years orchestrating elaborate schemes of manipulation and control that affect entire communities." Mike Torres had successfully hidden his guilt over Richard's murder by creating a network of psychological chaos that kept him feeling powerful while deflecting attention from his original crime. Perhaps most disturbing of all is the realization that Mike's manipulation campaigns had been so subtle and wide-ranging that most of his victims never realized they were being deliberately targeted. The bizarre Craigslist encounters, the strange neighbor behaviors, the online harassment, it had all seemed like random weirdness that was just part of modern life in a digital age. But it wasn't random at all. It was carefully orchestrated psychological warfare designed to keep an entire community feeling unsafe, suspicious, and isolated from one another. Mike Torres had discovered that the best way to hide one terrible crime was to create an atmosphere where smaller crimes and disturbing behaviors seemed normal and expected. Have you ever purchased something second-hand and later discovered it had a dark history that connected to larger criminal activities? Do you think people who commit serious crimes are more likely to engage in other forms of manipulation and deception as a way of maintaining psychological control? How many other unsolved crimes might be connected to seemingly unrelated patterns of strange behavior and online harassment in our communities? The leather jacket that led to solving Richard Morrison's decade-old murder also revealed how one person's guilt and need for control had been systematically destroying the peace and safety of an entire community through carefully orchestrated online manipulation campaigns that turned neighbors against each other and made everyone feel like they were living in constant danger from unknown threats. Thanks so much for watching. I can't express enough how much your support means. The likes, the comments, it all really helps the channel grow. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. I always take the time to read them. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on any new videos. See you next time.